True strength is not loud, it is patient. Discipline is not control, but devotion to the process of rebuilding. Guilt can consume or refine, depending on how one holds it. The path to quiet power lies not in conquering others, but in mastering oneself, one honest day at a time. This is a story about quiet power, discipline, and the art of rebuilding oneself through stillness and purpose.
The dawn crawled slowly over the mountains, brushing pale mist through the tall pines. In a wooden cabin, half buried in frost, Ronan Vale worked at his bench. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, the rhythmic scrape of metal against stone. Each motion breathed restraint. The forge's glow painted the walls in shades of amber and ash. A single photograph was pinned above the work table, 6 men in uniform, one face circled in red. The air around it felt heavier than the rest of the room. Ronan's breath fogged the window pane as he looked out at the sleeping forest. "We were supposed to come back together," he murmured, and the cabin seemed to absorb the words like it had heard them too many times before. The kettle hissed softly on the stove. The sound filled the silence until a knock broke it. 3 firm, deliberate raps. He froze. No one climbed this far without a reason. When he opened the door, Elias Ward stood there, wrapped in a heavy coat, snow on his shoulders. His eyes hadn't aged. They were still sharp as gunmetal. "You still sharpening steel when you should be sharpening yourself?" Elias asked, his voice low, blunt. Ronan stepped aside, letting him in. "I left that life behind." Elias studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Discipline isn't something you leave, Ronan. It leaves you when you stop earning it." The words lingered in the air long after the kettle's whistle faded. Outside, the fog thickened. Inside, the silence returned, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a mirror. That night, a storm crawled across the valley. The wind howled through the pine branches like old voices refusing to rest. Elias sat by the fire, hands folded, while Ronan stood near the door, watching lightning bleed through the clouds. "They're holding a memorial next week," Elias said, "for the men we lost." Ronan's jaw tightened. "I'm not the man they remember." Elias didn't look up. "Then maybe it's time to find out who you are now." Ronan didn't answer. The cabin felt too small, too filled with ghosts. He stepped into the rain. The forge sat beneath a tarp, dark and cold. He struck a match, fed the furnace with wet wood until it began to glow. The fire bit into the storm with defiance. He picked up the hammer, lifted the glowing bar of steel, and brought it down. Clang, clang, clang. The rhythm was harsh but steady. The heat stung his skin. The rain hissed as it touched the metal. He kept going. Discipline, he thought, wasn't about control. It was about persistence, about showing up for the work even when the world offered no applause. Each strike felt like a heartbeat returning to life. The thunder cracked above him, but he kept hammering, forging not a weapon, but a promise to never let silence become decay again. When the fire dimmed, he finally stopped. Elias watched from the doorway, nodding once. "Begin again tomorrow," he said. Ronan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The next morning, the mountain was quiet again, except for the crunch of tires on gravel. A jeep appeared between the trees, and a woman stepped out, brushing snow from her jacket. "Mara Ives," she said, extending her hand. "I'm writing about veterans who found peace after war." "You came to the wrong mountain," Ronan said flatly. She smiled, not mockingly, but with calm patience. Or maybe the right one. Inside the cabin, the forge had cooled. The room smelled faintly of metal and pine resin. Mara's eyes moved over everything, the unfinished blade, the disciplined order of tools. "I heard you disappeared after the mission," she said gently. "I wanted to understand why." Ronan leaned back, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Because sometimes the only way to live is to stop explaining yourself." She paused, pen still. "And has the silence helped?" He looked at her then, really looked. "It helped me see what kind of noise I'd become." For a moment they both sat in the quiet, the kind that was not awkward, but alive. Then Mara rose, closing her notebook. "Some people think peace means forgetting, but maybe it's just remembering differently." When she drove away, the cabin felt altered, less like a bunker, more like a threshold waiting to be crossed.
Days passed. The storm gave way to long streaks of gold sunlight across the snow. Ronan returned to the forge, where the unfinished blade awaited him. He set to work in silence, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. The rhythm of the hammer became prayer, the sparks his confession. He reheated, folded, quenched, and ground the steel until it gleamed, a living thing born from patience and heat. Elias watched him from the doorway. "You're not making a weapon," he said quietly. Ronan nodded. "No, I'm rebuilding a man." But as he lifted the blade, the reflection caught his eyes, and for a moment he saw a face he could never unsee. One of the men from that photograph, the one who didn't come home. He blinked. The blade slipped, slicing his palm. Blood met metal, red against silver. Elias stepped forward. "That's enough for today." Ronan pressed a cloth to his hand, eyes never leaving the blade. "Not until it's done." He didn't say it out of pride, but conviction. The kind of conviction born not from strength, but from the refusal to remain broken.
When he descended the mountain, the city felt foreign, too loud, too bright. Yet, somewhere within the chaos, he found a strange calm. He had learned to breathe inside noise now. He met Mara again at a small cafe tucked between office towers. "You look different," she said. "I started listening to silence," he replied. "Even here." She smiled. "Peace through quiet? Peace through not needing to shout." Later, Ronan sat across from Dr. Kellen Hart in a room lined with books and rain-soaked windows. The therapist's voice was even, his questions gentle but deliberate. "You've carried guilt like armor," Dr. Hart said. "Then maybe it's time I wore something lighter." He placed a sealed envelope on the table, inside handwritten letters to each of his fallen brothers. He had written them over nights filled with the hum of memory and the hiss of the forge. Not for anyone else, just to make peace with the echo. When he stepped outside, the city rain met him. He didn't hurry. For the first time, he let the rain touch his face without flinching. The past no longer demanded he hide from it. The sky was gray the day of the memorial. Veterans stood beneath umbrellas, faces lined with age and silence. The marble wall before them shimmered faintly, each engraved name catching the faintest reflection of those who survived. Ronan stood at the edge, hands in his pockets. Elias appeared beside him, wordless. "You came," Elias finally said. Ronan nodded. Couldn't keep running forever. He stepped forward, found the name he had avoided for years. His fingertips brushed over the carved letters. Cold stone, warm memory. "He died protecting me," Ronan whispered.
I've spent years trying to repay a debt that can't be paid. Then honor him by living differently. Discipline isn't punishment, it's purpose. The wind moved softly through the trees. The rain had stopped. For the first time, Ronan didn't feel the need to bow his head. He stood tall, the way his friend would have wanted. The silence was no longer a burden. It was a language. Back at the cabin, Ronan finished polishing the blade. Morning light filtered through the window, scattering gold across his workbench. The metal shone, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. He mounted it on the wall beside the old photograph. The red circle around his fallen brother's face had faded. He didn't replace it. Some wounds were meant to heal without erasing. He poured tea, sat down, and opened the window. The forest exhaled cold, clean air. A small bird landed on the sill, tilting its head. Ronan smiled faintly. The forge was silent. His heart was not. The dawn broke, pale and new, brushing warmth across the cabin walls. He sipped his tea and closed his eyes. The warrior's dawn isn't when he returns to battle, he thought. It's when he wakes without armor. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, peace, earned, not granted, settled quietly over him.